Stage 3 tax cuts increases the amount of money millions of households have to spend every day. Increasing the money they have also increases their borrowing power. Increasing your borrowing power, that leads to higher property prices in the past. Will it happen again? In this video, we'll learn 4 things about Stage 3 tax cuts. 1. What are they and how does Australia's tax system actually work? 2. How much do you stand to benefit from these tax cuts? 3. What will your household borrowing power improve by? You'll be able to calculate yourself exactly what the borrowing power improvement is from these tax cuts. And lastly, we're going to use Stage 2 tax cuts back in 2019 to work out exactly how tax cuts impact property prices. We're going to make a conclusion about which states, which cities, and which types of dwellings and houses are going to benefit most from these tax cuts. If you're interested, hit that subscribe button and follow me on my journey to produce content. Hi, I'm Reedham, founder of Confidence Finance, and I help property investors all across the country build, grow, and scale their property portfolios. Let's get into it. Here's the first thing. 1. What are Stage 3 tax cuts? We have a marginal tax rate system in Australia. Pretty simply, if you earn more income, the higher your tax rate is going to be. Now, Stage 3 tax cuts keeps this in place, but it changes our income bands around and changes the numbers around a little bit, which means that higher income earners are going to receive a bigger tax cut. All the way up to $200,000, they're going to see the largest tax cut from these changes. That's why it's controversial. Watch this little explainer here.
Stage 3 removes a whole tax bracket, the 37% one. It lowers the tax rate on one of the remaining brackets from 32.5% to 30% and lifts the income threshold for the top tax bracket from $180,000 to $200,000.
So, how much is your household going to benefit? If you look at this table here, it shows the tax cut benefit that each household is going to get, or each individual in a household is going to get. So simply find your income out, match it with this table, which I'll link in the comments below, and you can work out exactly how much more money is going to go into your pocket every year. You don't have to do anything for this. When you go to work, your employer gives you a net pay every month or every fortnight, and that money goes into your bank account. You're going to notice if you're on any of these income bands, you're going to get more money in your bank account from 1 July associated with these tax cut changes. You don't actually have to do anything to obtain them. They're set in place and nobody's getting a tax increase from these. Everyone is either getting a tax cut or no change at all. From this table, you can see that anyone earning up to $50,000 is pretty much getting no benefit at all. $125 for anyone getting up to 50 grand. As your income starts scaling up, the bigger your tax cut is going to be, all the way up to that $200,000 mark. So some households, if you're earning $150,000 and $200,000 as the other partner, a really high income household, earning $350,000 between you, you're going to see a pretty substantial benefit. One person's going to get a $9,075 tax cut, and the other person earning $150,000 is going to get a $3,975 tax cut from these changes. If you have two incomes, both at $200,000 or above, then you're going to get the maximum benefit from these tax changes, $9,075 each going into your pocket from 1 July next financial year that you're not getting at the moment. So let's look at a few different professions and a few different income groups to work out exactly the amount of tax people actually pay right now and see how it looks after these tax cuts filter through. If you're a barista or you work in retail and you're earning $45,000, or anyone earning $45,000 for that matter, you're going to get a tax cut benefit of exactly nil. You're paying roughly $5 grand in tax at the moment, and you're going to continue paying that tax amount next year too. Now, as you scale up the income band and get to around $100,000, so think polices, nurses, teachers, working with a little bit of overtime, we often see pay slips in and around this level. These groups of people, anyone earning that $100,000 mark, is going to get a little bit of a benefit from these tax cuts. They're going to see a $1,375 benefit from these tax cuts, and it's going to bring their effective tax rate down a little bit from roughly 25% at the moment to 23%. 3.6%. So to calculate your effective tax rate, all I've done here is work out the total tax you pay and divide that by your income. That gives you your effective tax rate because it essentially tells you exactly how much the tax person is going to take from your total income. That's your effective tax rate. Those earning $200,000, obviously on a good wicket here, think solicitors, doctors, anyone in that profession, IT, data, whatever it is, a lot of Sydney-siders earn $200,000. Those households and those individuals are going to stand to benefit the most. They're getting a $9,075 tax cut from these changes. Their effective tax rate is also coming down quite materially. The effective tax rate is 32.3% at the moment, and it's going to come down below 28%. So they've got a 3.5% to 4% improvement in their effective tax rate from these changes. It really, really helps households earning up to that $200,000 mark and a little bit above it too, of course. Anyone earning more than $200,000 also gets this $9,075 tax cut. So it helps anyone on that income band. The idea really is to, give money back into the pockets of those who are earning it. Let's tax aspiration less. That was really the purpose of stage 3 tax cuts, and it's putting money back in their pocket. Finally, I've used a celebrity or a sports person, someone earning $1 million a year in personal income. Obviously, there's not many people in this situation at all, and good on you if you've achieved that level of success. It's pretty amazing. If you go earn $1 million, you're going to find that your effective tax rate barely changes at all, even though you're going to get a $9,000 benefit from here. The reason is you get taxed a lot already, and you're going to continue to be taxed a lot, and the threshold bands don't change above the $200,000 mark. You're still going to be paying 45 cents on the dollar, and the reason why these tax rates are really, really high is because those that are earning above the 250 mark start getting taxed on their additional superannuation contributions, Div 293 tax, that's what it's called, so their effective tax rate's even higher, and I've used Pay Calculator to get these numbers. So if you take a look here, a person earning $1 million, their effective tax rate's 48% rounded down, and afterwards their tax rate remains at 48% rounded up. So it makes a fairly immaterial difference to their effective tax rate from these changes. There's a lot of criticism to these tax changes.
Plus, it destroys Australia's progressive tax system. The idea that the more you earn and the wealthier you are, the more tax you pay.
I'm not so sure you can make those sort of conclusions when this is what our tax system will be in 2024 and beyond. It's still very clearly aggressive tax rate system where higher income earners pay a higher rate of tax. Now that we've worked out how much you stand to benefit, I'm going to show you a really quick way to work out how much your borrowing power improves by when buying a home. All else equal, everything else remaining the same, if you can borrow $2 million before, you're going to see a benefit of roughly 10% from these changes. So, summarizing, yearly tax benefit multiplied by 11 equals your owner-occupier borrowing power improvement. Yearly tax benefit multiplied by 15 to 20 in that bandwidth, depending on the yield you purchase it with, is your investor borrowing power improvement from these tax changes. Now, for investors, it's a little bit different. So if you want to extrapolate this higher net income to an investment borrowing power, the calculations work a little bit differently because you can claim tax add-backs in those calculators when you purchase an investment dwelling versus an owner-occupier dwelling. And on top of that, you also get rental income. When you go buy an investment property, that property goes and earns you more income, and that feeds back into the calculators too. What will these tax cuts do to property prices? Here at Confidence Finance, we've done something behind the scenes that nobody else has and you can't find anywhere. We have modeled out an individual's household borrowing power from the year 2017 every year all the way to today. We do this by yearly monitoring how lending serviceability calculators change year on year. And then whenever there's a change in the market, we work out exactly what the borrowing power improvement is from that change, and we try and ascertain, does it correlate with property prices? What you can see here is this is someone earning $160,000 each, a household earning $160,000 each, their borrowing power year on year from 2017 all the way to 2023. What you can see is there have been a couple periods where borrowing powers have moved up and down a lot over the last 5 years. So what you can kind of conclude here is borrowing capacities do correlate with house prices, at least in direction, but maybe not in quantum. And also you can see on the downside, when you reduce someone's borrowing power, it changes the direction of property markets in Sydney, but it might not equivocate one for one because people could come in and provide cash deposits or increase the equity contributions that they have. And this is what happened in 2023. But When you give people more money, like we did in 2019, we have a little bit of evidence to suggest that that increases property prices. 2019, we gave people 50% more borrowing power, property prices rose by 50%. Go back further in 2015-16, you'll see that borrowing power was improved then, and as a result, house prices did too. At Confidence Finance, we've modeled out exactly what these tax cuts do to this household to borrowing power. Here, you can see a 10% improvement in borrowing power, which may mean that you can see a property price increase of a similar amount from these changes. I'm not quite sure that you can equivocate it so strongly because there are greater, more important factors in play in 2024 too. What happens to interest rates? What happens to consumer confidence? What happens to the economy? What happens to housing supply and demand are far greater information sources to determine exactly what's going to happen to property prices. But all else equal, this will lead to a 10% increase in borrowing powers for really high income households, and those people stand to benefit the most from these tax changes, which means that Sydney is the city that benefits the most from these tax changes. It is a city where people need the greatest borrowing power to buy. It is a city where debt sizes are the highest. It is a city where people need to actually access that money to go purchase houses. In particular, you're going to see Sydney above median dwellings, so above that $1.5 million mark, as the biggest beneficiaries from these tax cuts. Somewhere between 1.5 to 4 million, that range is where people actually go and obtain loans to go and purchase their homes. Often they get loans as much as they can and have large amounts in offsets and low loan to value ratios. They can't actually get 80% loans on $4 million quite often. They just don't have the incomes to support that, but they're going to increase their borrowing from say 2 million to 2.2 million from this as a result. So it may increase their budget to go and participate at auctions with a slightly higher budget, up to $200,000 from these changes. Now, rate cuts and assessment rate changes are really the main drivers to borrowing capacity and the main influences, but net income changes like this do play a role, and you can see that in this chart with a 10% improvement in borrowing power. If you enjoyed this video, do me a big favor, hit that subscribe button so I can produce more and more content like this, and hope you found it interesting.